How's Jason doing?
Okay, I'm pretty sure the flashing of the lights was for me and for no one else. And so, mainly because I know that Jim No is up there, and that's exactly what he would do. We want to welcome you here tonight for our midweek service. Um, we have a special treat for you tonight. He could go by doctor or any other number of things, but basically he just belongs to Emily. But we're excited. We're going to get to listen to Isaac. We do not have a more highly educated person in Brown County other than Isaac, especially in regards to the Greek and Hebrew. I don't know how many of you have studied at Vanderbilt, but that is pretty incredible. So I'm just nerding out because he's so smart and wildly humble. Because I said, how do I refer to you? And he's like, how about Isaac? And I'm like, okay. So I kind of fanboy out with Isaac a little bit. So, but we're excited to have him. He's going to be presenting us with a parable. But before we do any of that, what we really want to do is just spend time lifting God up in song. And so I'm going to ask Dr. Klutts, Waylon, if you wouldn't mind, if you will start us off, please.
How did I get the feeling that
all the stuff he said about Isaac came from here, but when you talk to me about Dr. Klutts, it's from somewhere else. I'm just kidding. I love you, Doug. I also am excited to hear Isaac as well. If y'all will, Jim requested this song. If y'all will mark in your songbook, 728C, that's going to be the song of invitation. There's not one. Jim was playing a joke on me, so I figured I would spread it to y'all. We're going to do number 63. 6-3. I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from my enemies. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. I will call upon the Lord. 344. We'll do the first and third verse. Low in the grave he lay, Jesus my Savior, waiting the coming day. Jesus my Lord, up from the grave he arose with the mighty triumph for his foes. He arose a victor from the dark domain, and he lives forever with his saints to reign. He arose, hallelujah, Christ arose. Sorry, I'm going to pitch that up just a little bit. Death cannot keep his prey. Jesus, my Savior, he tore the bars away. Jesus, my Lord, up from the grave he arose with the mighty triumph for his foes. He arose a victor from the dark domain, and he lives forever with his saints to reign. He arose, hallelujah, Christ arose.
Just a few quick announcements before we have our prayer. Just a reminder, we are going to be starting Grief Share. We talked about this on Sunday. It's going to be in this classroom 4, starting next week. And so we want to encourage you to be a part of that. We would love for you to sign up. It will make it a little bit easier for us. You can register in various ways. If you have any questions, you can go online or you can call the office and we'll help you with that. That's going to be next week. Also, starting this Sunday, we're going to be signing up for life groups. I just strongly want to encourage you to join in on that. It is, I don't know. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, I feel like I'm sweating all of a sudden. I just want to fall down and, here I am, Lord. This is the road to Damascus moment. So if you would consider signing up for life groups. I love being a part of church, and it is awesome. But sometimes we don't get to build those relationships when we're in a room with a large room and everybody's facing the same way. Life groups gives us an opportunity to share life, to bear one another's burdens. And so please consider doing that. Also, just two more announcements. Oasis is going to be next Sunday night. It's going to be at 4:30. So for those of you who haven't been before, it's a great intergenerational opportunity. Everybody comes in around 4:30. We have some games, some excitement, and then we have a devotional after that. So if you haven't been, come and join us. If you've been, you already know you want to be back because it's a great time. And then lastly, if we can just please keep Tony in our prayers. Krisky in the passing of his son-in-law, Casey. If you just please remember his daughter, Hannah, and his grandson, Hannah, and Malcolm, and that whole family as they're grieving. And so I would like to offer a prayer for that. And then we'll have a couple more songs. After our prayer, we'll dismiss our youth to their class. Let's pray if you would. God, we just want to lift up to you the Smith family and just the tragedy and the pain and the heartache that they're dealing with. Lord, I pray that you be with them. Be with Hannah, who has just lost so much in such a short amount of time and is in the midst of grief and holding her little boy and them walking through that grief. And so I just pray that you be with them. I ask that you be with Tony and John and all the others as they have opportunities to minister to that family. Just please be with them as they both mourn Casey's or their loss, but also be able to be reminded of what Casey has because of your son and his promise. Lord, for all the things we have coming up, we just pray that they will be all ways that we can just give glory and praise to you. Thank you especially for your son, Jesus. It's in his name that I pray. Amen. Okay, youth, you guys are dismissed.
Number 853. 853. Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing his mercy and his grace. In the mansions bright and blessed, he'll prepare for us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Let us then be true and faithful, trusting, serving every day. Just one glimpse of him in glory will the toils of life repay. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. 324. Alas, and did my Savior bleed, and did my sovereign die? Would he devote that same
All right, can y'all hear me? Okay, perfect. Let me know if you can't hear me. I'm okay with yelling at you if I need to. Again, my name is Isaac. Thank you for letting me teach tonight. It's an honor and a privilege. We are going to turn to John chapter 10. I'm such a millennial right now. I have my iPad. Usually I have my paper Bible, but I didn't bring it with me tonight. We're going to read the Good Shepherd. I'm sure we're all familiar with this. Okay, we've gone over parables, obviously, this entire summer, and I have actually not been able to sit in on a Wednesday night class because I've been helping out with the babies class on Wednesday nights. So I really wish I could have sat through the classes that were being taught. But it's an honor to do this tonight. So let's go to John chapter 10. Doug introduced us, remember at the beginning of the summer, to the word parable. What does a parable mean? It's a Greek word, right? For it's not a metaphor, it's not a simile, it's something in between, right? It's a little bit more than a metaphor. It's a little bit more than a simile. I'm going to use this board just for a couple times. Don't worry, it's not going to be a whole lot. I'm not doing PowerPoints tonight, actually. Usually I do PowerPoints, but we only have about 30 minutes. So the Greek word parable, parabole, it's another translation of the Hebrew word mashal. So whenever you see the word, if you ever come across the word mashal in the Old Testament, whenever the New Testament uses a word, because mashal means something like a riddle, it means something like a metaphorical story in a way. All the New Testament is doing is translating that Hebrew word mashal, which is another word for parable. And as Doug already mentioned, he explained it pretty well. It's a setting beside. It's a falling, right? The parabole has something to do with throwing something along, right? That's the sense there, and that's where we get our English word parable from. It's just a transliteration, taking that Greek word and turning it into English, parable. If you recall, in 1 Samuel chapter 10, the word parable is used in that story. And then, of course, we're familiar, or if you're not familiar, with the David story where Nathan comes along and gives his parable, right? That's probably the most famous example of where we get really a first full instance of a parable in the Old Testament. And then, of course, in Isaiah chapter 5, we have another example of a parable there. In this sense, it's a complete story. In the Isaiah chapter, in chapter 5, it's a story that's meaning is hidden, and it can either be discerned or interpreted by the person listening to the story, or in some cases, like in the book of Ezekiel, when there's a parable given to Ezekiel that he has to give to the Israelites, it's actually up to God to reveal what the parable means, not the individual. So it comes through an ordinary person like Nathan. Sometimes it could come to a prophet, and then it's up to God, actually, or the prophet, to help the Israelites discern what that message means. So it's something more than just a story or a metaphor. Oftentimes, the meaning is only given by God, right? Now, in the New Testament, parable occurs about 45 times in the Gospels, twice in Hebrews. And let me read you some examples from the Gospels. Matthew chapter 13, verse 18. Hear then the parable of the sower. Matthew 13, 24. He put before them another parable. Matthew 13, 31. He put before them another parable. And then Matthew 13, 33. He told them another parable. Who is he? Jesus. 8 times in Matthew, 4 times in Mark, and 16 times in Luke. And how many? Do you want to guess how many times the word parable occurs in the Gospel of John? Chuck is saying 0. You're right. It's 0. And we all know this chapter as what? What did you grow up hearing the title of this story as? What is the top of your Bible say in John chapter 10? The Good Shepherd. Does some of your versions say the parable of the Good Shepherd? Okay, some translations do have that as a header, the parable of the Good Shepherd, even though the word parable doesn't occur in this chapter at all. Kind of weird, right? But we call it the parable of the shepherd. You're in a class tonight, the parable of the Good Shepherd. We're doing a class on the parables. Now, Doug didn't lie to you. This is actually a parable. John just used a different word. All he used is the word, let me write it out again here for you. He uses the word paroimia. It's very similar to parable. Hopefully you can see that. If not, you can come look after class. But he uses the word paraoimia, which is almost the same thing as a parable. He just doesn't use the word parable like Matthew, Mark, and Luke do. Okay, let's just go ahead and let's dive into the chapter. We don't have that much time here. I'm going to start reading. I'm reading from the NRSV. You might be reading from the NIV, the King James. Okay, verse 1. Very truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate but climbs in by another way is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them. There's that word, paroimia. This figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So again, Jesus said to him, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father. Again, the Jews were divided because of these words. Many of them were saying, he has a demon and is out of his mind. Why listen to him? Others were saying, these are not the words of one who has a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? Okay, and that wraps up the the section on that parable. Okay, so what is going on here? What's the purpose of the beginning of chapter 10? What just happened prior to Jesus giving his speech on him being the gate and the good shepherd? What are we familiar with? He what? He heals a blind man, right. What else happened in there? Right. Yep, there's a lot of questioning that goes on there prior to him healing the blind man, and then, of course, after healing the blind man, there's a lot more, ironically, skepticism towards Jesus and the blind man, right, after he heals him. What else? Yeah, that's a common theme, right? He gets into it with the Pharisees. Oftentimes, unless you're Nicodemus, it doesn't turn out well, right? And in this case, John uses this word throughout the entire gospel, the Jews, right? Oftentimes, he's mostly talking about Sadducees, Pharisees, those who were against Jesus. Even though John probably was a Jew himself, right? Or he was a Jew himself, he doesn't speak highly of a lot of the Jews who were in opposition to Jesus, right? So he immediately goes into this speech or this parable, and who is he speaking to? Who is Jesus speaking to? How do we know? Exactly. I'm just trying to have us to read it slowly, right? Because sometimes we think he's speaking to the crowd. Sometimes we think he's speaking to his apostles, his disciples. In this case, he's speaking to the Pharisees, who he had just been speaking to prior to verse 1. Remember, they didn't have chapter divisions back then, so oftentimes it's up to us to kind of make the judgment call on where do we begin a new section, where do we end a section. So in this case, he's still speaking to the Pharisees, and he's using imagery. And I've never herded sheep. I've never done any of that. Some of you here probably have. Some of you here probably do. So help me out here if you want to speak up and speak to what that experience is like. But Jesus uses imagery explicitly from where? From what? Exactly. And what in their culture did they derive a lot of these, where do we see a lot of these images from in Israelite culture? It has the word, the word testament is the second word. Yes, yep. Right, and I think I heard someone, is it Jennifer? Oh, Old Testament, yeah, exactly. So we know about all these images of shepherds, sheep herding, goat herding, all that stuff from the Old Testament. And a passage that Jesus probably has in mind here, we won't get the time to read it all tonight, of course, but Ezekiel chapter 34. In Ezekiel chapter 34, God is talking to Ezekiel, telling him to tell the Israelites, the Israelite leaders actually, who were supposed to be the sheep herders and the leaders of the Israelites. He gives them basically a warning that you have not taken care of my sheep, you have not herded them correctly, but you have actually just fattened up yourselves. You've worked up your kingdom, and all to the destruction of my sheep, the Israelites. And in this chapter, Jesus is taking that exact imagery from Ezekiel 34 and using it against the Pharisees, who were supposed to be, a lot of them actually, were supposed to be the higher ups, right? The people that can read, the people that can write, the people that had wealth, and the people that were supposed to tend to the I would just say common Israelites, right? The average Joe. They were supposed to watch over, and they had responsibility to impart knowledge to the Israelites, make sure that they went to temple, to sacrifice, to follow the Ten Commandments, in essence. So he's talking to the Pharisees, who are supposed to be the leaders of the sheep, and who would have been considered the shepherds, right? But in this case, that's not what's going on, especially in regard to the blind man. Any questions so far? Comments? Okay. So we already talked about Jesus healing the blind man. The blind man is now able to see. He's questioned by the Pharisees. How are you able to see? Well, I am able to see because Jesus healed me. How could a sinner heal a blind man? And you know the rest of the story. But what happens is Jesus defends the blind man from the Pharisees, who in this instance are probably identified as the thieves and the bandits, right? Because they were supposed to lead and tend to the sheep, but instead they entered a different route. They what? They tried to climb the wall, as Jesus says, those people, the thieves and the bandits, do not enter through the gate. They climb the walls and try to steal and ravage the sheep. And Jesus is calling them out for that in this instance. Now, Jesus claims 2 titles. Which 2 titles does he claim in this parable? The shepherd is one, and the gatekeeper. Right, exactly. In verse 7, chapter 10, he claims, I'm the door. And then in verses 11 and 14, I am the shepherd. He says it twice. Why? Because they didn't understand the figure of speech right away. So he had to continue to reiterate and repeat himself. That's what oftentimes that's what he has to do when he is speaking in parables, especially to those who aren't his disciples or apostles. Now, here's the ironic thing. Amongst John's audience, whoever John was writing to, right? Probably the church in the first century, a lot of people would have been skeptical of shepherds. Why? Because in the Roman Empire and the rural areas, shepherds were considered rugged. They were considered rough. They oftentimes lived on other people's land and worked for them. Oftentimes they were just hired hands, and they would work the sheep and tend to the sheep for their masters and their owners, right? Even though that's the case, the idea here is that Jesus is still trying to impart this message of leadership. A shepherd is supposed to be a leader, right? He's supposed to tend to his sheep, call his sheep. The sheep know him by his name, and his job is to lead them accordingly each and every day, right? The cool thing is, just some fun facts here, is that sheep, like today, were prized for wool. Today, we we prefer our cheese made of cow's milk, right? Well, back in the first century, they actually preferred their milk coming from sheep, their cheese coming from sheep milk, which is a pretty interesting idea to think about. But despite the important role that shepherds played in the Old Testament and in the entire ancient world, entire ancient Near East, actually, by this period, the first century, they were looked down upon. They were despised for what they did because they weren't considered, quote unquote, the upper class or part of the upper echelon in this instance. If you read some of the texts from this area, they describe sheep herders or shepherds as murderers. A lot of Jewish texts equate them with Gentiles, or they even equated them with people like tax collectors, which people didn't like tax collectors, right? Just think of Judas. And then when when Jesus mentions thieves and robbers, let's see, starting in verse 11, I am the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, I know my own, and my own know me. Okay. What I was going to say is that the thing about thieves and robbers, they were very common. Like today, they were very common back then. Oftentimes, people in this era had to hire what we would call desert police to basically escort people who were herding their sheep or traveling through the desert. They would fend them off from people that would try to rob other people's sheep with weapons. And so oftentimes, shepherds had to carry a staff, right, to fend off robbers. So Jesus is not just throwing in a simple fun fact about people who were trying to steal sheep, but this was an actual problem at this time and in this period. Let's see here. Not used to using my iPad that much. Hold on here, sorry. Okay. What do we know about sheep? What were sheep supposed? I mean, oftentimes we call sheep not the smartest of animals, right? But what were sheep known to do when their master came in and tended to them? What were they really good at, if anything? Yeah, they follow the voice of their master. And in this case, in this example, oftentimes the master would have some sort of almost like an instrument, a pitch pipe almost, to summon the sheep. And the sheep would be so good at remembering the master's voice and was able to follow only the master's voice. Sheep would know if someone else walked in through the door into the encampment of the sheep, right? That's what sheep were really good at, actually. And so what does that mean for us? I mean, what sort of message does that say, not only about first century Israelites and people in the Roman Empire, but what does it say about us as a community and as a body of Christ when it comes to knowing our shepherd? Sorry? Yeah, we better know his voice. Yeah. Right. And there are a lot of voices that distract us every day, right? And it takes fine-tuning, it takes training, it takes getting used to, obviously, discernment, discerning who's calling you, who's trying to speak to you, who's trying to summon you, those sorts of things. What else? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. And in Scripture, specifically in the Old Testament, how did God's people know him? Well, there are different examples. Prophets, kings like King David, King Solomon, and oftentimes his word, right? Those were the tools, or those were the channels through which the Israelites were able to access God and come to know God and discern his voice, right? So what do we think about when Jesus calls himself the door? He says, I am the gate. Sorry, some translations say door, some say gate. What do you think he's meaning when he's saying, I am the door? Because he says, I'm the door, and then he says, I am the shepherd. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's also in John too. And yeah, and that's also in John too. Yeah, what else is he getting at with that imagery of him being the gate? What does that mean? Or what do you think it means? He's the what? Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And those who try to get in go the wrong way, right? They climb up the wall. Those are the thieves. Those are the bandits. They try to steal and attack the sheep. Mm-hmm. Right. So again, Jesus said to them, very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. So he's using two images, gate, shepherd. All these answers all make sense, right? There's another piece of a golden nugget here, because if you think about how the doors and the gates of where the sheep would rest and spend their day, how they looked during this time, oftentimes there was a big stone wall, a gate, like a circle, and there was a huge wooden door that you closed off, and only the master was allowed in there. In this instance, though, we know actually from archaeology there were temporary closings and enclosures for sheep during the summertime where there was no gate. There was no gate. There was just the shepherd. And so in a sense, the shepherd actually acted as the door and the shepherd. So I think that's why Jesus is saying, I am the gate, says it twice, and then he says, I am the shepherd. So oftentimes when there was no gate, the shepherd would have to lie on the floor to guard the sheep, oftentimes with a weapon, because thieves and bandits would come in. So in this sense, Jesus is saying, yes, I am the door and I am the good shepherd, because literally I think he's envisioning some sort of summer enclosement where there was no gate for the sheep. So he is acting as both. Pretty interesting. And then what else does Jesus say about his relationship to the sheep? Go down to verse 13. He's not just saying, I'm the good shepherd and one who tends to my flock. But look in verse 13. The hired hand runs away because the hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them in also, and they will listen to my voice. I will have one flock. There will be one flock, one shepherd. What is he saying about his relationship to his sheep? Not that he's just the good shepherd, but what else? He knows his sheep, right? Oh, he owns a sheep, yeah. What else? Mm-hmm. For Jew and, in this case, for Gentile, right? And he also lays down his life for them, which ironically, who did Jesus die at the hands of? The Sanhedrin, which made up the Pharisees and the Sadducees, right? So he's telling this, he's speaking this to the Pharisees and actually sort of semi-prophesying that he will lay down his life for his flock at the hands of these people. Exactly, yeah, yep. He has the power to pick it back up, which is his resurrection, right? Yeah. And this is all prompted by Jesus healing a blind man. What's the ironic thing about the healing of the blind man? Because towards the end of the chapter, in verse 21, others were saying, these are not the words of one who has a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? What had just happened before this? He healed the blind man, right? What's ironic about the blind man and the sheep knowing the voice of the good shepherd, of their master? Exactly. The person who actually knew the good shepherd was a blind person who couldn't see, right? You can only hear. While the people who could see and hear are the ones who rejected Jesus, right? And Jesus equates them with the thieves, with the bandits, because he said, all who came before me are thieves and bandits. Probably the Pharisees, probably some Jews who claimed to be the Messiah, because we know that happened a little bit during Jesus' time, and then in the book of Acts, and then after that, there were people claiming to be the Messiah. But those are all thieves and bandits, right? And the person who recognized Jesus as the Good Shepherd was a guy who couldn't even see, while those who could see rejected him. So there's a lot of imagery. There's a lot of stuff going on in this parable, in this figure of speech that Jesus is playing around with, and all because of one blind man who couldn't see, and Jesus healed him, and those who could see rejected him. We got maybe a couple more minutes. Anything else? I know that was pretty fast. Yeah. Exactly, right. Which makes this entire parable all that more real, because oftentimes we think of parables as Jesus is presenting a story like the rich man and Lazarus or the rich young ruler. Oftentimes they're not literal stories, but they're trying to convey a message. In this case, it's actually prompted by what literally happened just prior to this chapter, right? Like Doug was saying, to the blind man. And I don't think that the example of shepherd, of thieves, bandits, of the good shepherd and the sheep is an accident. I really do think Jesus is trying to use what the Israelites, especially the Pharisees, knew from childhood, the Old Testament, and in this case, Ezekiel 34. Yeah. Right. And they were all the more responsible, and they were the ones in the seat of power, right? They were supposed to be tending to the flock, and that's what Ezekiel chapter 34 is talking about. It's addressing the king, mostly the northern kings of Israel, who were supposed to be tending to the flock, and the exact opposite was happening. And so too in this chapter, the exact opposite is happening, not only to the blind man, but to all of the sheep of Jesus in this case. Okay, anything else? All right, well, I think that's it. I think we're going to sing a song now, right? Oh, we're not. We're going to pray, and then we're done. Dear Lord, thank you for letting us gather here tonight and worship and read your word together as a body, as a community. We ask that you help us meditate on this more throughout the week. We ask that you bless those who are on the prayer request list and those who were not able to be here tonight. We ask that you be with us as we go on throughout our night and just the rest of the week. Help us be a light, your light to other people.